Sports Intel with Ryan Walsh is brought to you by
Mary Freebed, Collectible Insurance Services, Air Call Aesthetic and General Dentistry, Calder Financial, Grand Management Group, Ride In Investments, Encore Business Group, Jim Hegland of JH Realty, Williams Chiropractic, and iCore.
Sports Intel with Ryan Walsh airs live Monday nights, 7 p.m. Eastern on Jethro.fm. Sports Intel with Ryan Walsh.
Stay informed and stay vigilant. Okay, we're testing this out. Welcome into Sports Intel, we hope. We don't have a producer right now, and my first guest is here already, which is great. So if I can get the mics hot, him and I will talk here. I'm going to heat up another mic, and that will be for Mike, Dr. Mike Williams here. And I think this may be playing over. Where's the microphone? Or here, where's the mouse here? We got to pause this here, Doc. I might be talking over this. We've got Mom in the hallway there. She's testing our comms, so I'm hoping to get a thumbs up from her eventually, and then we're going to test Dr. Williams' microphone because he's on time, even though I believe he just saw my niece play basketball here. So I'm going to take my computer over here and see. Our producer, apparently his car would not start. That's something that people can probably relate to out there. So we're gonna try to go hot with Doc. I'm getting the thumbs up that we're good. So Doc, I think I have your mic on. So welcome to the show, Dr. Michael Williams of Williams Chiropractic. I appreciate you being here, especially since there's no one else here with me.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me.
We're gonna get a thumbs up here, hopefully on that test. It's about a few second delay, but yeah, we'll probably just go right into your segment. Now, here's the thing, Doc. As you know, we celebrate the thing of the day on the show. The only problem is the thing of the day is National Tater Tot Day. That's not a good day for Dr. Williams, I don't think. That tater tots would not be in the recommended diet, I don't think.
Well, you can find some. If you find some that aren't cooked in seed oils,
Okay.
They're not as bad, and it might be something that once in a while you could add in.
Okay. I'm going to make sure. I'm going to light up both these mics to make sure we get the right one here. Okay, seed oil. So what's the recommended oil then for like an olive oil, something like that?
Yeah, if you can find some of them actually are made with like a beef tallow. Those would be good.
Okay.
Or I like avocado oil,
Okay.
coconut oil, and olive oil.
So we can go to Steak and Shake and get the beef tallow fries there?
I haven't been. I've seen the signs. It's a better option for you than some of the others out there. I wouldn't make it a daily part of your nutrition, but once in a while, any of that stuff is probably going to be okay. Just try to figure out the best option, and that if it is true high quality beef tallow, that would certainly be a better option than some of them out there.
That's an interesting one. I hadn't heard of that until the Steak and Shake thing happened, and then I think they were maybe talking about it at like a government level, talking about the beef tallow.
Yeah, originally, my understanding is that was what was used in most restaurants. That was what they fried their French fries in, and if you can get a plain French fry, and it is just potato with some sea salt fried in beef tallow. It's probably doesn't have a ton of nutritional value, but it's not going to be a strike against you like some of the stuff is that's fried in those inflammatory seed oils.
That was an interesting thing that you've taught me about the seed oils here because the reason Dr. Williams is here is he's my doctor. I've been seeing him for now a few months, and much to his chagrin, but he's done he's done great work. I've lost like 20 pounds since starting to see him. I've felt a lot healthier. I had gone in there with not knowing a lot of, or not having good health at that time. I was in poor health, And so the nice part about Dr. Williams' process is he basically starts from the inside out. He analyzes kind of this has always been my criticism when I go into a doc, because they take the tests. We talked about this the other day, the blood tests and everything, and it can show what's going on in your body, but it doesn't really help give information. It's more like diagnosis after the fact. It's like, okay, well, your sugars are high. Well, why are your sugars high? What are you, I had some with that where I had reduced the amount of sugar I ate, but then I was metabolizing different things that I thought were more protein based and ended up being carbs into sugars. So your process kind of takes people through the start of things. Okay, what are you eating? What are you putting in your body? And then we'll figure out the rest of it.
Right. Yeah. So if we're gonna figure out why things are not working the way that they should, we need to understand as many of the variables as we can. And one of the big ones, one of the most important ones that I look at is diet. And then to take it a step further, I look at the ability for the body to digest. Does the digestive system work as it's intended, so that when you eat something, can it actually be broken down? It's one thing to be eating healthy, but if your healthy diet can't be digested, you're still going to find some struggles. So the way that we look at things is with an eye for does the digestive system work as it's intended to work, and then how can we ease the burden on it by making sure that we're not putting in things that are going to create extra trouble that don't need to be there.
The big thing for me that kind of caused some of the issues was egg whites. I thought I was eating healthy because my cholesterol was high. I got my numbers done. My cholesterol was high, and I started doing egg whites. And then I thought I was eating all healthy, thinking this is great. And then I went in to see Doc, and he said, "Nah, that's not really how to do it."
Yeah, it's an interesting thing, because if you eat an eggs are one of my favorite things. Eggs are something that is packed with protein and good fats, and they're a really good way to start the day, or really any time of the day. They're just a really good source. But if you separate out the components, then you start finding that they don't act the same way in the body. You don't get all of the benefits from them. They get treated a little differently by the body if you start separating out the whites and the yolks.
You'll be proud of me, Doc. I had 8 eggs yesterday, full eggs though, not just egg whites. So there you go. My egg count has gone way up, and like I said, that's been one of the contributing factors. Because even going in there, you worry, okay, well, he's going to cut out all the things I like. He's going to cut out all the sugars. He's going to cut out all the fats. But I actually like my diet more now than I did before, when I was kind of cheating and having more of the sugars. The sugars aren't good for you. They don't make you feel good. And then now I am eating a lot more meat, because you said, hey, eat meat if it runs, swims, or flies, right?
That's what protein is. That's how I identify a protein. If it runs, swims, or flies, that's where protein comes from, at least in the easiest sense of it.
I mean, I don't chase my dinner down or anything. That would really probably be the ideal. Then I could burn some energy, and that's why hunters were always so thin. I know you hunt, but
yeah, maybe we should say if at one time it was able to run, swim, or fly. That's what you should be looking for.
Then you've got like a Rocky type situation where you're chasing the chicken around for agility, and then have to catch it, and then maybe cook it after that.
It's also just as beneficial to you if you buy them at the store.
Yes, I prefer that method. That's what I've been going with. Actually, one of the main places I've been getting a lot of my meats now is Sobe Meats, which is one of the sponsors for the station here. Great meat market, not too far away from my house. So so that's a great place to get stuff. But yeah, I wanted to have you in, Doc, because I wanted to talk about kind of how you deal. We didn't really talk about this, even though I've been actively seeing you through the first month of the year, but how you deal with people coming in. Okay, what should I do in the new year? What should I do with New Year's resolutions? Do you really, because you're really just trying to change the permanence of their diet and their health and their habits. It's not necessarily about, okay, go to Planet Fitness at the beginning of the year for 3 weeks and then get back to your sugary habits.
Right. Yeah. if a New Year's resolution is the impetus of change, if that's the thing that makes somebody want to be better and make themselves healthier, then I'm all for it. But it has to be something that can be sustainable. So anytime I work with somebody, that's always my first goal is how do we make this a shift that they can manage? Because if we, like you were saying, if I start just cutting everything out and tell them everything you're doing is wrong, nothing about your life can stay, that can be a tough pill to swallow right off the bat. So we look for things that are easily attainable and sustainable, and then we build on top of that.
That's I've found that in the first few months that we've been doing this, that it is nice. You feel eased into it. And you don't really shame the person either, because everybody has their bad habits, whether they have to do with diet or exercise or another category of life. But it's about, that's what I always tell people, is it's about layering habits on top of each other. Because if you just try to go cold turkey and say, okay, tomorrow I'm going to be a totally different person, I'm going to wake up and I'm going to do 26 things, that's not really going to work. It's not going to stick that way. You got to do one, and that's why you kind of start with, that's why I recommend starting with something like CNU, because then you're making some fundamental changes that'll give you things like more energy, better health, and you'll be able to feel like you can do more with your day. Then the rest of that stuff kind of comes along.
Sure. Yeah. It'd be sort of like saying tonight that you want to run a marathon and signing up for one tomorrow. If you haven't been training for a marathon, it's going to be a tough day for you. So it's better to start with a attainable training schedule and work your way up to it, and that way your body and your mind are prepared for it. And that's kind of what I work on. It's not without its challenges. You can't see change if you're not willing to change, and so we do have to have some tough conversations once in a while. But mostly, if people are willing to listen to the things that I have to say, willing to start implementing them, then we have something we can work with.
That it's a great method. I recommend Dr. Williams heavily here. We're going to we got everybody in studio here, so we're looking good. We're going to take a break. We're going to regroup, and then we're going to talk more with Doc Williams. We're going to talk maybe about some NFL injuries too, because that's been a big discussion lately. It's really a discussion all the time, but it's been a big discussion lately. And with his unique approach, I wanted to discuss some injuries with him, specifically the Kirby Joseph injury, but the impetus of some injuries, because again, kind of like we were talking about earlier in the process, you have a tendency to look at results and then back up from there. He has a tendency to look at what the cause could be rather than the effect. So stick with us. You're listening to the Sports Intel radio show on Jethro FM. Coming back here with Dr. Michael Williams in studio, talking about health and health practices. And I wanted to talk about health and practices, because that's kind of been the discussion here at the Lions level of things. They do have a lot of injuries. I'm actually venturing to get this guy on our Thursday show, but there's a guy that with a company called Sports Info Solutions that he basically goes over a lot of the injury related analytics. So that might be part of a future discussion for us. But he had the Lions at number 2 as far as total games missed by their players this season. The Bears were actually number 1. And then he also has a more detailed metric that then evaluates who missed the games and basically the value of their appearance in the games. So then how many points each team misses out on. And I believe the Lions were like 10th on that side of the metric. But that's been such a big discussion, and we've had other people, Dr. Liao, who's a friend of the show and has been on several times talking about injuries. We've had a bunch of people that have talked about this. We've talked about it with Shane Graham, former player, and I think you would bring an interesting perspective to this, because a lot of people do it where they say, okay, well, yeah, he's got a knee injury. Here's what's going on with his knee. Here's the cartilage. Here's how I would address it as a surgeon, as a knee surgeon, or what have you. But there's a lot of things that are happening in the body that could be leading to some tendencies for somebody like Kirby Joseph, and then your body is off balance, off center, and then that leads to some issues with a knee, a hip, a tightness where you blow out an Achilles, whatever the injury is. So I'd like to kind of have you go through the process of obviously you don't have his medical charts or anything like that, but when you see an injury like that, kind of what thought process you go through.
Well, so the first thing I start with is the idea that anytime the body is under stress, it's going to be tightening up. Stress or a struggle equals tightness within the body. So if we can identify where that is, then we can start to narrow that down. With something like a knee, unless there is physical trauma to the knee, direct impact or something like that, it's usually not, in my experience, is the knee a lot of times is not the problem. It's where things sort of end up, where the injury happens, but it's not necessarily what the problem is. And that's sometimes why it's tough to get them to heal, because if you're trying to heal a knee and the knee is not the problem, it's gonna be continually aggravated until you understand what it is. I was using the example that if you have an apartment and there's a leak in an apartment on the top floor, it may not show up until it gets to the apartment on the bottom floor. And the apartment on the bottom is going to see all the results of it, but that's not where you fix the problem. You have to clean up the mess, but you still have to get up and find where the leak was coming from. So that's where I would start if I was to look at this, and that's where running that integrated urinalysis panel would be my first step, which is what I start with all of my new patients. And that would tell me things like, does his body have what it needs in order to heal and repair? So when you're asking the body to heal, the first question you need to ask is, does it have the parts and pieces that are necessary for healing to take place? And in that case, if you saw that there were some things missing, you would have to address that before you could ask the body to do anything differently than what it's doing.
There were a couple reasons that we have ongoing discussions about this. Dr. Williams and I do, and one of the things that kind of led me to thinking this would be a good fit to talk about it is you've talked about kind of the tie between having certain deficiencies in the body, not getting enough of a mineral or vitamin, and how that leads to tightness in a specific part of the body, and then that can help describe, okay, let's see, if you're going to make a certain area tight, then things in that chain or that area of the body are inherently going to get more pressure, more stress, more load. And the other part of that, and we can handle it in two parts, but the other part of that is I used to be, a weight lifter. I used to do a lot of different supplements, all clean supplements as far as legal and all that kind of stuff. No quote unquote supplements, but real supplements, but things like creatine and protein. And although you can have some short-term benefits from those things, and football players use a lot of those kinds of things typically because they're looking for a competitive advantage, that can also overload your system too. So thinking of those two things as somebody that covers the sports the way that I do, I thought, well, both of those things are probably present in a lot of these sports injuries.
Yeah, it makes me wonder with kind of the prevalence of something like creatine. Creatine can be aggravating to the kidneys, and I've had several players with these kind of chronic injuries, and one of the things that we've addressed is how much creatine they take, because if the kidneys are aggravated, it creates a muscle contraction that can irritate the lower back. One comes to mind. He was a baseball player, and he was having all of these low back issues, and they couldn't get him to resolve. And I saw him, and first thing I did was check the reflexes that would tell me whether the kidneys were struggling. There's an area across the lower back that would get tight if the kidneys are having a hard time. I felt that area, and he wanted to come off my table because they were so tight and so sensitive. And so I knew that he was having a kidney struggle, and we had to address that if we were going to fix his lower back. And to do it, that's when I asked him, I said, how much creatine are you taking? And he was trying to bulk up and was in the process of trying to get as much of it in as he could. And so he was taking a lot of it. And I said, you gotta lay off that for a while. And as soon as he did, his his kidneys started to calm down, his back pain went away, and it was a relatively easy fix after that. But if you extend that a little further, that muscle contraction across the lower back, one of the things that's possible is it could create a distortion in the pelvis. It could create a tip or a tilt, and that would create tension that would travel down, depending on which way. If it tips backward or forward, it would tighten the muscles that go all the way down the front or the back of the leg, and could then create unnecessary stress or strain on the knee, on the ankle and the Achilles. And so that's a potential for some of these injuries that we're talking about.
It's just fascinating to talk about this stuff because as listeners of the show know, we like to kind of go to the root of things. We don't like to discuss what happened on that 4th and 7 play. The guy dropped it. That's kind of inherently a little uninteresting to me, I guess. And it's the same way with the injuries, to just say, okay, how do we explain these injuries? Is it the field? Well, they're all playing on roughly the same fields. There might be grass, and there might be turf, and there might be different impact there that then exacerbate another issue, but it's obviously not the primary issue. Otherwise, they'd all be getting hurt. Well, is it practice issues, practice intensity that's come up in the media recently with the Lions? And although they do practice hard, it's not like these other teams don't practice hard. Shane was talking about how this era practices a little less hard because of the rules of what you're supposed to do in the practices now. That's now different. So it's like, okay, well, you could have some issues with your body where you're kind of born with an issue, born with a bad knee, born with bad stuff. But for the most part, it's, hey, you've got kind of the general same set of parts as everybody else, and it's how you maintain them over the years and how you treat them. So this is what I'm thinking though, Doc, because I think they have trainers to kind of treat all of the people afterwards, but they need somebody to help them at the dinner table, help them get their back straight, help them fix all the problems. The only problem is that's a longer commute for you to go to Detroit and do all that stuff. Otherwise, I'd petition for it, I think.
Maybe we could meet halfway.
Yeah, you have like a 5-minute commute right now. So, but no, I mean this stuff. I joke about it, but this stuff is all part of the process. It makes a lot more sense that you're inside, that what you're putting in your body may have an impact rather than the field that you play on, or not that wouldn't have any effect, because they're having a lot of impact in general. They're getting hit every time. They're getting hit by other bodies. But you've talked about this in different appointments with me, how you would have people with the same injury where they kind of have the same effect on their body, but one heals differently. And so then if that happens in the NFL, which it does, some people get hit the same kind of way, but then one gets hurt, one doesn't. This is a way to kind of describe why there's differences there.
Right, sure. Yeah, if the impact itself creates disruptions in the function of the body, then you have to put those things back, and that's where treatment with chiropractic or physical therapy or some of the other modalities that are available would help to put those things back, and those are the players that usually recover relatively quickly. If there's some of these other deficiency type things, or these chronic digestive issues, or other chronic inflammatory things that are causing these problems, then those are the ones that are going to struggle to heal. They're not going to be able to recover as well, because that same issue is still active in the body. I was giving this some thought, and I was kind of thinking, one of the things I think it's part of this is that we're starting to see these guys play at an earlier age and at a higher level. And so if you have that deficiency, or if you have this imbalance, whatever it may be, once that's evident in the body, or once that starts in the body, you have whatever number of times that you're able to stress the body before something's going to happen. And where in the past that might not have started until you were 18 or 20 or a little bit later, and if you say you get 15 years of this, it would show up in your late 30s, early 40s, and maybe in retirement, and from at least from the NFL, and you wouldn't see it. Now with these guys starting earlier and playing tougher at an earlier age, that timeline gets moved up, and so you see some of these things showing up in early 20s athletes, but just because things are sort of accelerated based on when they started playing and the level at which they're playing at.
This is going to be a weird comparison, but there's something in professional wrestling that they call a bump card, even though it's obviously predetermined and all that. They still are taking real physical shots, and they do get their bodies get weathered, but they basically say, like, you can only take a certain bump or do something a certain amount of times, and then you're kind of done, because it's like your body is kind of given out. So that sounds like this concept a little bit. I'm wondering if, I know you've told me before that some of it too is these two things maybe coinciding, what you were talking about, and the fact that what you put in your body, you're a little bit more, just like when you're younger, you're more lithe, you're more flexible, you're more able to take some of that punishment. When you get older, your stomach is kind of the same way. It's been weathered a little bit, and it's like, okay, I can't process this stuff the way I used to when you were 18, and now I'm 30, 40 years old. I can't do this anymore.
Yeah, we do see a little bit of diminished capacity as we age, and that's a normal part of the aging process. And this is true for everyone. We make less stomach acid as we get older. So the activity in the stomach, the activity of the whole digestive system does slow down somewhat as we get older. So it does mean that you're not going to be able to handle things quite as well at 25 as you did when you were 15, or 35 when you were 25, and so on. So there is that little bit diminished capacity, and that's why some of the things you can get away with in your 20s and feel okay the next day, you're not going to be able to get away with as you try to do it in your 30s or your 40s.
I think that's a concept that a lot of people that are a certain type of genarian, however many they are getting up to here with the decades, are able to relate to. But yeah, good stuff on the injuries. I thought we could do this because it does two things. It informs us about injuries. That's always something of interest for fans out there, because we want to explain what's happening to our sports teams. But more importantly, I know I'm saying this on a sports show, more importantly, this stuff is important to your own health. It's good to know about your own health and how it impacts your health. I've been learning a lot more about those things myself. So if people are interested in coming in and kind of starting the process based on what they've heard here today, how would you get started, and where would you direct them here?
Sure, yeah. The easiest way to find me is on the website. It's williamschiropracticgr.com. You can see a little more about me, about my background and the methods that I use, and get a little more information that way. You can also schedule appointments right from the website.
It's a great service. I can't recommend it highly enough. Like I said at the beginning of the interview, when I wasn't sure if people could hear me, I got to make sure that it actually gets out on the radio and on the podcast. But I've been using Dr. Williams' services for a few months now, and I've experienced a good amount of weight loss and a lot better health. And so it's just good information. I think the key is to understand that a lot of your services are more about prevention, that, as far as, like, you want to try to get to things before they get worse, because I think people look at, well, okay, I'm fine, I'm good enough, but it's really about optimizing yourself and preventing bigger things down the road, so that you don't have these big injuries, big health issues that cost a lot more money and have a lot more compound effects.
Sure, yeah, it's always easier to fix a problem when it's small than when it gets bigger. So those are usually, I can usually hit more of a home run when they come in and say, I've only had this problem for 3 days versus I've had this problem for 30 years. But it's all just looking at the way the body is struggling and how we can help it out of that struggle.
he's great at it, and like I said, I can't recommend him enough. I appreciate you coming on the show, Doc. We'll definitely have you back because I enjoyed that injury segment as well. I think there's a lot of things we can do talking about sports injuries as they kind of develop in the market and in sports as a whole, because unfortunately they're not going anywhere. So it's a good discussion to have. But appreciate you coming on the show, and we'll look forward to having you back on here.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Doc. Appreciate it. So we're going to take a quick break. Then I'm going to check in with Dan. He had to come in here under duress here, so I'm going to check in with D Money, see how he's doing. He's barely been able to take us. He's got one coat on. I don't know what his coat situation is there. We got to figure it out. So we'll come back here in studio, and then after that segment, we'll bring on Evan Sabourin of the Flying Octopus podcast and a bunch of other things. He's worked on the Rich Eisen show, a bunch of other stuff. I was researching him the other day, so we're going to talk to him on both Sports Intel and the Shane Graham's Extra Points show, so we can talk some football with him. But stick with us. You're listening to Sports Intel on Jethro FM. Coming back in here with D Money, I got thrown a little bit of a curveball here at the beginning of the show because I saw a car pull in, and I thought, perfect, D Money's here. And then it was actually Dr. Williams, so I switched to his seat. I had Mom help check the comms. That worked. Dan said we were running pretty well. He was testing us in the car, but unfortunately he had some car problems, which I feel like people can relate to here.
Yeah, so unfortunately I drive the old car, and my wife gets the new car to take the kids everywhere, and these last 2 weeks have been brutal on the battery, and it finally gave out. So,
well, I'm glad Chivalry's not dead, but unfortunately the battery was dead, so now that might have killed it a little bit.
Yeah, well, I'm hoping leaving it running for a little bit will charge it enough for the morning, because I do still need the car before I can either replace it or it gets warmer.
Your dad was curious why I was calling him out of town. I forgot he was out of town, and I called him first. Then I called you, so he's probably wondering. I haven't texted him back. I got to text him and tell him, hey, we're here. Maybe he's listening to it.
He texted me, and then also I got a call from Eric, so he just wanted to know what was going on. So everyone knows. Well,
sorry about that. Didn't mean to. I was trying to get us on here, but I'm glad I successfully did that here. We didn't get a chance to celebrate. We can't do this with Dr. Williams around because he's so healthy. He's focused on the health. It's National Tater Tot Day. So I tried to pitch that past him. He said that was okay as long as it was cooked in certain oils. That's a lot of work.
I think that's when I joined in when you guys were talking about beef tallow.
Yeah.
I know there's a few restaurants that do it. Like you guys said Steak and Shake, but I know Buffalo Wild Wings does it too. If
do they?
Them up. Yeah, they have beef tallow fries now. So.
Okay. So I'm curious if I think I'm going to ask the remaining two guests here, and I'm going to start with you, their favorite way to have potatoes on the side. So you got tater tots, you got French fries, you got mashed potatoes, baked potatoes, all that kind of stuff.
I love fries, but I like breakfast food, so hash browns are actually probably my favorite. Not American fries, where I've had people call them American potatoes, which bothers me for some reason. But I like I like a shredded hash brown.
What's a foreign potato?
I don't know.
Irish?
I don't know exactly Irish potato. I don't know. Like I've heard breakfast potatoes. That kind of makes sense to me. But either cooked in a pan or you can fry them, but like kind of cubed or cut up.
So you're getting American potatoes as opposed to the Irish potatoes that you're getting here in America.
They're from Idaho.
Yeah. So that's funny. Well, that's a good pick. I think I'm going to ask Evan and Harry that same question here because we're going to be talking Red Wings and Pistons. Because
I heard you talk about you eat a lot more protein now. And do you have a favorite potato? I mean, potato is from the earth. If it's prepared correctly, it's not the most unhealthy thing in the world.
I know
it's starchy and carby, but
Dr. Williams is kind of down on potatoes, so I've been kind of shuffling them out of my diet, but I do like some. I do like some French fries, but I would say the French fries that I like are ones where they're like the fresh cut fries.
Okay.
So
are you thinking like Five Guys?
Exactly. Five Guys. Penn Station has a good one. I don't know if you've ever had
I don't
theirs.
think there's one near enough to me to go. I feel like there's one on 28th Street far down. Is that wrong? Or is there one in the
That
area?
one's not there anymore.
No.
There's one on Kalamazoo. This is a good discussion to have, though, because I wouldn't mind having them as a sponsor, because I do go there a decent amount. And it is
must
a
be
good
your side of
place.
town. Are you from that side of town? or
No,
are you-
I pass by it when I come back from work.
Okay.
So, but it's basically Kalamazoo near M6 there. But they have a good fry. But yeah, fresh cut fry.
That makes sense.
That would be that with not a lot of salt on it. That's why I like the Five Guys ones, because you get
Maybe
the
you can find a fresh cut fry in beef tallow.
that's good. Yeah, because I guess I didn't ask him about peanut oil. He said no seed oils.
I feel like peanut oil would be a seed oil.
That's in the seed oil
I
category.
don't know who uses it, but I've heard people be scared of it because
That's-
of the allergy.
Yeah, that's what I think that's what Five Guys uses. No, Penn Station. I think
Oh,
that's
they
a Penn
use peanut
Station.
oil?
I think they use peanut oil. So see, we're just discussing all kinds of food here, but yeah, I'm glad you're up and running. I'm glad we got you going. We're actually in good shape on the timing of the show here so far, because we got Dr. Williams in early, and I'm glad he was here, and now we're basically on pace to be able to call Evan and talk some Red Wings. You and Steve talked to him.
It was actually very interesting. I had meant to add his podcast to my queue because, like, hockey of the major four teams in Detroit is the one I least follow, but I would like to be a little bit more informed because I like watching and going to hockey games. I just, you only have so much mental battery for sports information, and you're a sports host, so you have to have a bigger one than me.
I'm up to, I don't know how many games. As of the 22nd, I had watched 50 games for the two shows. Between all of the Detroit sports and then trying to follow the playoffs for the Shane Graham show and all of those kinds of things. I know it's higher now. I know I'm in the 60s. I'll probably be on pace. I was probably on pace for 70 for the month for January.
Of all four sports?
Yeah.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah, because I watched every hockey game, every Red Wings game, every Pistons game, and then all of the football games, and both Michigan and Michigan State basketball.
Yeah, I just read an article today. The broadcasts and the company that broadcasts the Pistons, Red Wings, and not Tigers anymore, that could be an issue. Do you have the FanDuel Sports app right now to watch it? Or
I do. That has been, I think, a bane for a lot of people that are trying to watch those games, because it was Bally Sports.
Right.
Eventually, I want to have somebody on the show to discuss the TV market side of things, because it is interesting, and it does affect a lot of folks, because three of them, well, now minus the Tigers, as you referenced, Dan, but three of the sports last year were all on FanDuel,
right.
But it was Bally, and then they were bought out, and then I don't understand how these places they basically keep going out of business, but the parent companies are not out of business. So I don't know what about the broadcast rights side of things.
I know, like, at one point they were forced to, like, break it up or something because, like, antitrust laws get into effect. So, but then somebody has to want to actually broadcast it and try to make money off of it.
And you would think that there would be money in it, in the sense that it's more popular than ever. You have agreements in place via collective bargaining and all sorts of things that kind of what the markets are making, especially in baseball. That's
a very interesting topic. I would love to hear that guest, because, like, if you can find one, like somebody who specializes in this, I don't know where you find that person, and that is probably where you get the big bucks.
Yeah, there's a few that I've heard, but they're all kind of on larger platforms. Like David Sampson is very good on this subject, but he's got his own podcast. He used to be the general manager for the Marlins. Andrew Marchand covers a lot of this stuff. So we'll find our way to a contact as we're trying to gain more contacts for these in-depth things on the show. We've got a lot of folks in the works, which is good. So, but speaking of folks in the works, this is a good one. We might even try this, Dan. We've got a half hour with this guy. This guy's worked in TV for a long time. Evan Sabourin here.
Yeah, he's in LA, I think, from the last time we talked to him.
Yeah, I hooked up with him because of the Flying Octopus podcast, but then I started going through his LinkedIn the other day, actually, and he's worked on the Rich Eisen show. He's worked on Red Zone. He's worked on a bunch of different things. So I think we might continue this conversation conversation with him. He might have some insights for us. He's got a lot of knowledge there. So we'll bring on Evan after the break and see what we can get into with him, especially potatoes. We're going to start with potatoes. Come on, let's be serious. So stick with us. You're listening to Sports Intel on Jethro FM. Happy to bring this next guest on. He was on the show recently, so hopefully you heard him. He talked with D-Money and Steve on that show, but they primarily covered the Sergei Fedorov retirement ceremony that he was at, but I wanted to get his takes on the current situation with the Red Wings because there's a lot going on. But now we've actually added to the question list here, Evan, so we might start in a different place, but we start where we always start, which is with the thing of the day. So it's National Tater Tot Day. I'm curious if you have a favorite way to consume potatoes. French fries, Dan chose hash browns. That's a good choice. Mashed potato, baked potato. Do you have a favorite type of potato?
Well, that caught me off guard. I'm going straight mashed, man. You can't go wrong with mashed potatoes. It signifies Thanksgiving, makes you think of Christmas time. I'm 100% mashed, always have been.
I like it. You're loyal. You're a loyal fan. You've been covering the Red Wings for a long time, and that feeds in perfectly because we actually did a Thanksgiving foods draft on the show for Thanksgiving because we were actually on the air on Thanksgiving. So the three of us that are in studio right now and Shane Graham all did a Thanksgiving foods draft. So you can kind of see where our head's at, Evan. We get distracted by the food, and then we kind of throw in some Red Wings talk and other talk along with it. But I want to start you in a different place. We're going to talk Red Wings, current Red Wings, I promise. But we were talking about, I know you have a lot of experience. I was telling the audience that you have your hands in a lot of different things right now. You've got the Flying Octopus Pod, which is how we connected. But I was actually looking at your LinkedIn the other day, and you have extensive experience in a lot of high-end TV and production places here, and a lot of big names, Rich Eisen and the Red Zone and entities that people are very familiar with. And we were talking about broadcast rights. I'm not going to assume you're an expert in everything in TV because you produce TV, but I'm curious about your experience on the TV side and the production side, and would kind of like to start there so people can know a little bit more about your background.
Yeah. Well, I've been in Los Angeles. I moved from Plymouth, Michigan, about 25 years ago, 26 now, and came out to work, got into it with the NFL and Fox. Was with them for a bit, and then I got reeled into the Red Zone channel and was one of the first producers on that show. It's crazy how long it's been. You know, we didn't know what it would be at the time, but it honestly took off pretty well, I'd say. And yeah, along the way, that was with working with DirecTV, AT&T, and then we started bringing in shows like Rich Eisen and Dan Patrick. So worked with them for about 10, 11 years. So yeah, I've been around the NFL for a bit here.
I'm interested to talk to you about that more when we have you, because we're going to have Evan on the Shane Graham's Extra Points here as well, because we're going to be talking some football with them. So I think that'll be interesting, especially with Shane in studio, talking more about the football production side of things. I'll have a lot of Red Zone questions for you by the time we get there, because that's an interesting subject matter unto itself, and then we can maybe have more of a discussion about the TV part. But you've got a lot of bona fides that you're very modest about, so I wanted to make sure to get those out there. But the reason Evan's here is he's on the Flying Octopus Pod. He does a lot of good work with that, with other friends of the show, Devin and Tony, and so I want to get your takes, because you didn't get a chance to talk about the current Wings situation. And from when you came on the show a couple weeks ago, it's changed a little bit. They've been good all season. They've been scuffling a little bit. I'm thinking this Olympic break, is very timely for them. Edvinson needs to rest. They need to regroup and see what they want to do with the trade deadline. And they've kind of been the kings of the 1-goal game here for most of the season, but some of these games have trended away from being anywhere close to 1 goal on the bad side a few times.
Yeah, they've hit a little rough patch here, and I think it was bound to happen. I don't think the sky is falling yet. Still in a playoff spot. I think if you asked any Red Wings fan before the season started, did you think that they would be in the position that they are heading into the Olympic break? They currently have the third most points in the Eastern Conference. They've also played, after tonight, will have played the most games in the Eastern Conference as well, so that's something you got to remember. But, I think this is the first time they've lost 3 games since mid-November. And Simon Edvinsson is, you can arguably say, and we talk about this a lot on our show, is probably one of the 4 or 5 most important Red Wings players. Getting him back and healthy, you could say the Olympic break came just at the perfect time. Like you said, they really need him back. And I'm glad that he didn't even end up in playing for the Olympic team in Sweden, because this month off that they're going to have here, basically a month, is going to be very key in getting him healthy, because he's someone that they're going to need down the stretch. We know that their defense outside of Seider and Edvinsson and Axel Sandin-Pellikka, who's starting to get sheltered minutes now, because he's at the point in his rookie year where he's played more games than he's ever played. And you talk about that rookie wall we all mentioned. I think they're trying to shelter him more. I do hope a trade's coming here soon. The trade freeze for the Olympic break goes into effect on Wednesday at 3 p.m. Eastern. So it'll be interesting to see if something happens before that. I'm not so sure it does. We listen to all these media pundits, and they have the Red Wings tied to all these big names yet, but I'm not sure Yzerman's ready to take that big swing yet. And you can look at these past couple games, especially against the Colorado Avalanche. The Red Wings aren't ready for big time yet. I don't think it's time for that big move. So if they can get somebody to hopefully solidify, hopefully have something on the second pairing that they could probably play with Ben Sherratt. It's not something that's it's going to blow your mind, but someone just solid defensively, because that's what this team needs right now. As far as the top 6, I think they really could look at a forward in the top 6. But again, I'm not sure where Yzerman. He said over and over again he's here to play the long game. And just it's not exactly breaking news, but the Red Wings aren't going to win the Stanley Cup this year. And I still think they're building. They initiated 3 rookies at the beginning of the year into the system, and now there's only 2 playing regular minutes. But the Red Wings still have some work to do. The main thing that's been really great this year about Detroit is John Gibson, who didn't have the hottest start, but now in the last month or so, he is the goalie that the Red Wings wanted to bring in to solidify that position, because they haven't had a consistent goaltender in a long time now. And Gibson's been that guy who has come in. He has stolen games for the Red Wings. He stole that one in Sergei Fedorov retirement night. His presence back there is making me more optimistic about how this season will play out. So I'm glad to see that he's going to get some rest right now. Again, Olympic break couldn't come soon enough, and the Red Wings are going to have a very interesting run those last 30 or so games.
I've really enjoyed the season. We were talking about this. Dan and I were talking about this in studio. How this is kind of the last sport for him of the big 4 on his bandwidth, if you will. But he has been getting into it, and I think this is the time. I know people have a tendency to be slightly fair weather with their fandom, not necessarily in that they don't like the team if they're not as good, but they don't watch them as much. And this is a team on the rise. I think you guys have covered and dealt with a lot of the ups and downs that have happened over the last few years. But with Yzerman taken over, he's had to institute his so-called Yzer plan and stock the cupboards up and get young guys in there. And as you mentioned, Evan, it's starting to come to fruition. They've got 3 guys now that you talked about that came to this level, and you're seeing a lot of young guys as a whole. They might have a couple of the older guys in the NHL, but I got to imagine the average is still one of the youngest teams, because even with Kane and Talbot and Van Riemsdyk, they've got a lot of younger guys on this team, bringing the average down, and you can tell it's starting to come together. I agree with you that they're not necessarily, the goal this year has got to be the playoffs as a whole, and it'd be great to maybe win a series, but they're likely not going to make a cup run. But it'll be interesting to see what they do for a trade. You kind of covered that a little bit, but the first thing I want to ask about what you said last here is you talked about Edvinsson being one of the top 5 most important players. I'm curious if you have some other people kind of filling that out, maybe that would surprise. I agree with you, and I thought that's where you were going to go with that. But there's some obvious ones in there. But I'm curious who you guys discuss as maybe kind of an underrated important player like Edvinson.
Oh, that's as far as the team. I mean, you can't really say that. I'll tell you who I've really loved play lately is the play of Elmer Soderblom. I think he's really come into his own the last few weeks as far as being underrated. I really like his physicality, his length, the way he can battle down low across the boards. You can't. If you're an NHL defenseman, you can't really predict that kind of length behind you. So he's really great at stick lifts and just the guy that grinds and gets in the middle and digs out that puck for the forwards. I've really been impressed with his play these last few weeks, and you're seeing him get scratched less and less often. But, I mean, as far as I think Sherratt has been very underrated this season. We just got his big contract last week. It was great to see him score the goal on Patrick Kane's tie-breaking goal to pass Modano for the most points by a U.S.-born player. Obviously, he's not going to be a guy you rely on for defense, but it was good to see that for all the Sherratt haters out there that didn't like that contract. I think he's had a pretty solid season from a physical standpoint, standing up for his guys. So, we talked on our podcast this week with Devin Little and talked about him kind of like being the dad of that Red Wings locker room. He's an older defenseman. He's been around the league, and he's kind of a mentor for some of these younger defensemen that have been coming up because most of the Red Wings defense is young, and I think he's been a bright spot as of recently. That it's guys like that, but I think, you look at James Van Riemsdyk and what he's done this season. I mean, you can arguably say he's been the Red Wings, Steve Yzerman's best veteran free agent signing that he's brought over so far. So I think, once we get to that trade deadline, I don't know that what the big names that are available that Yzerman's going to want to do. He's not going to want to bring in somebody with, he's not. I don't think this Panarin thing that everyone's talking about. I don't think Artemi Panarin has any interest in coming to Detroit. I think he wants to go to a Cup contender. He's 35, but I think Yzerman is going to be looking for somebody with terms. So maybe somebody a little bit younger, probably an older veteran. But that's something that we won't see for down the road. And then again, I hope they can add some kind of second pairing defenseman. It doesn't have to be a home run. It doesn't have to be somebody where you give up a ton of assets yet. But I think that you worry about that during the summer. And you play with what you have right now, minus, seeing what you can upgrade somewhat in your second pairing and your top six.
That sounds like a great plan to me. I want to come back after the break and discuss it a little bit more because I think people get a little too there was the Quinn Hughes thing. There was a lot of different rumors, and it's nice to fantasy book these teams, especially when you don't have to pay for it or give away assets or do any of that stuff. But I like the pace that they're going at, even though it's slower and steadier. So we'll come back and talk about that with Evan. Stick with us. You're listening to Sports Intel on Jethro FM.
From the GarbarinoRoofs.com studios in Granville.
Country with a twist. Jethro FM. 1530 AM. WYGR Wyoming Grand Rapids. 94.9 FM Grand Rapids. 99.5 FM Lowell. And Jethro South. 980 AM WAKV Otsego Plainwell. 98.9 FM Otsego. And 105.1 FM Kalamazoo. Available worldwide at jethro.fm.
Happy to bring back Evan here for a second segment, having a good conversation about the Wings and kind of their plans headed into the break. I think there's a few reasons, Evan, that they're going to be buyers. One, they've trended the right way to be buyers. They've earned the chance to be buyers. Also, I didn't think that they would get past this deadline, especially with what happened at the last one, without making some sort of move to try to improve the team, because that gained a lot of traction with Larkin and others making comments, especially after the season, but at the time as well. Now you've got a lot more stability on the team. You've got McClellan and his group firmly in charge. They had to come into town as kind of renegades, outlaws, and try to improve the team and figure things out. Now they've done that. They've had a full off season. And I think the other reason is in that offseason, Yzerman has had a very good offseason as far as his acquisitions have gone. I mean, you mentioned JVR, you mentioned some of the other young guys that they pulled up and that they've developed recently. I think some of the other lower key signings like in Appleton or Bernard Docker, they're getting good value out of those guys. And then you mentioned the trade for Gibson, which is now trending towards, at first it was like, okay, this is like a B+ trade. Then it was hard to see who was 1A and 1B with him and Talbot, and now with how he's been playing, that's been a home run here so far. So I think that's the other reason to say, okay, maybe we do take a shot, not a big shot like you said, but a shot at acquiring players that they think will kind of fit that same model.
Yeah, and that's what I think. I think anyone expecting Yzerman to take like a big swing, the thing, like I said, I think Quinn Hughes might be a Red Wing had he committed to an extension. We heard that he wasn't ready to commit to an extension. I think I said Yzerman wants somebody with term, and he wants someone that's not going to be. He's not getting rentals. They're not in a rental position. They're not a Colorado. They're not a Tampa Bay. They're not a Carolina Hurricanes. They're a team that is still growing and still learning how to win. I mean, at this time next year, I think that the team's going to look significantly different, especially when you consider the defense. At this point where they are, I think you want an Axel Sandin Pellikka's minutes even sheltered. I mean, the other night he only played 11 minutes. You want that Axel Sandin Pellikka in a third pairing role at this point, and hopefully next year is ready for him to take the step into a second pairing role. I think that's why I don't want them to take a big swing. Yzerman, you have to remember that Steve Yzerman was part of that 25-year playoff run, and he has said, I don't know how many times, that he wants to build this team for, it's not for a couple playoff runs here and there. He wants to build what this Red Wings organization is known for, and that is, an iconic franchise that can compete year in and year out like they did. Now, it's a little harder in today's NHL, obviously, with the salary cap, but I don't think you need to. They're at the point where you go out and mortgage the future. Can you give up futures? Yes, I think you can, but it's got to be the right deal and the right player. That's why, when you listen to the media and you listen to all these national pundits, and they've got the Red Wings in on every big name, whether it's Quinn Hughes or Rasmus Andersson or now Artemi Panarin. You have to understand that a lot of that is just it's clickbait. I've worked in media long enough to know that people want to talk about what could be or what could happen, and I just realistically don't think the Red Wings are at that point, like they were in 1996-97 when they went out and got a Brendan Shanahan, to put them over the top. I just don't think the Red Wings are there. I think they have the foundation, but it's still going to take probably another off season for they're really competing and maybe winning a playoff series. But for this season, I don't know that big swing's there. If that player is available, that's a different story. But right now, a second pairing defenseman who can solidly lock it down defensively. I'm thinking about like a Marcus Pettersson from Vancouver. You look at Calgary, maybe a Mackenzie Weegar. There are names to be had that won't not cost prime assets. And, even though the Red Wings have built up this huge pool of assets, they're still not ready to blow them all unless it's for the right player. So, you hear about Artemi Panarin. That's he's a 35-year-old guy looking for a big extension with $50 million. Realistically, that's not what the Red Wings need right now. It's going to be interesting to see what Yzerman does because he keeps everything close to the vest. You're not going to find out, what he's thinking or what he's doing or who he's talking to. But I definitely think there'll be buyers. I want to temper expectations because I don't think it's going to be the big swing that a lot of people are hoping for.
I'm 100% with you, and we usually advocate on the show that that's really the right method because you hit the nail on the head. We usually talk about that with all these teams, Pistons, Lions, Wings, whatever, that if you have a slower, more sustained build, then you usually have longer term success if you can kind of get those younger guys, get a young core, layer people in after that, then you can usually have sustainable success. If you take big swings, then you're liable to kind of flame out faster. It may work, but you're liable to maybe be kind of in the hit or miss category. So I know you talked about Hughes, that was a big rumor for a while, and he's a generational player. He's a great player. There's no question about that. But when you were looking at the possible package that they would have to give up, it wasn't only the future assets, it was the fact that they were going to have to give up guys that they'd now have to fill their roles on the team. And these are guys that you're hoping to get reinforcements for, that maybe either send them down the line or have backups behind them on the prospective lines that reinforce and make the team better overall. So now you're really thinning out your current cadre of players, not only your future cadre of players.
Yeah, and that's, it's we talk about that too on our show, in that it's, you fix one hole, but you create two more, and I'm not sure that the Red Wings are in that spot right now. If you look at it, right now, if Axel Sandin Pellikka is what we think he's going to be, and he looks like he will be, you have a Sider, you have an Edmondson, and you have Axel Sandin Pellikka, and you also have Sherratt signed for the next 3 years. You aren't looking for, down the road. Maybe this season you are, but down the road you're looking to fill those that 4, 5, and 6 spot. So you have your young core defensemen that you're going to move forward with. So you get those guys in free agency, and you also it's those big names just aren't available. People say like big swings, like everyone wants a Zach Werenski, or everybody wants a Quinn Hughes, but I just don't think the Red Wings have those 3 defensemen that are going to be the future with Sherratt for the next few years. Fill it out through then. Then you have to think about the prospects the Red Wings have coming. You could even see Dmitry Bolchelnikov at the end of this year, another guy that Red Wings fans kind of sometimes forget about. You have Michael Branson-Nygaard developing, and he looks like he's going to be a very good player in the NHL one day. Carter Bear, you still got this young core with Emmett Finney, Lucas Raymond. The Red Wings have the right pieces. It just takes time for them to build. These are kids we're talking about. We're talking about, 20, 22, 23-year-old kids. 20, 22, 23-year-old kids, they're not making Stanley Cup runs. They need to, they need to cook. They need to grow. They need that experience. But to me, when you look at the talent on this roster, what they have as far as prospect systems, we haven't even talked about the goalies. Trey Augustine looks like he's going to be in the AHL soon. Sebastian Cossa will probably be ready next season. It's coming. It's coming. I just don't think right now is the time to blow it all up. I think you go after a solid depth defenseman who is a defensive defenseman, and I think that's how you play it out this year. That's my opinion. I know I'll probably take heat for it. Everyone wants that big swing, big player. I just don't think this is the right time, but I think it is the right time to, find those bottom pairing guy.
Well, I might, if you're going to take heat for that, I might take heat for my response to it, which will be in the court of public opinion. If you do take some heat, especially on subjects like this, you might be on the right path. Let's just be honest about that, because people get impatient, and I get it. They want to see the top players. They want to see their team do the best they can, but these people are in these jobs for a reason, and I think even though there has been a playoff drought, Yzerman, like you said, is proving that he's really put a lot of talent into this system, and you just gotta give it a little time, and then it might be back to the sustainability of his time. And I'm really glad you made the point. We'll talk about this more when you're on the Extra Points show, and we talk about your career more, but made the point about kind of the aggregation and the clickbait part of the national media and some of these larger pundits, because that's what they do. They say things to get you riled up so that you come back and you engage. We don't get as much engagement on this show because we try to do more informational type stuff where we get local pundits like yourself, people that cover the market, people that know things well, and that are actually on the beat covering things every day. That's the type of folks that you want to have. And so I'm glad we have you and Devin and Tony and a bunch of other folks to cover it. And I want to give you a chance to plug where they can follow you guys for this information on a day-to-day and week-to-week basis.
Yeah, you can follow us on Twitter at Flying Octopod. Our YouTube channel is at The Flying Octopod. We're putting out stuff, daily, a lot of Red Wings updates, opinions. We're all over the place. We've kind of collaborated a little with Hockeytown West podcast that's there in Grand Rapids, who they cover the Griffins and actually the Toledo Walleye as well. They're great guys if you're not following them too. That's basically it.
Nick, Brandon, and Travis are all friends of the show. Yep. They've all been on the show, so good plug for Hockeytown West there. We keep an eye on the Griffins here on this show too, especially being in the local market and with them being so good. They're a good team to cover, and it shows how well they've done with the talent acquisition part at that level too. So appreciate you coming on. If you want to hear more from Evan, he'll be on the Shane Graham Extra Points show on Thursday. So we'll be talking some Lions, and now we're going to add some Red Zone and TV talk to the mix for that show too. So appreciate you coming on, Evan, and we'll talk to you on Thursday here.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
All right, thanks, Evan. Talk to you soon.
Take care.
Thanks to Evan Sabourin. He's great stuff on the hockey side, and I'm excited to talk about his football side of things, because not to lay too heavy of a hand on it, but I think people have to understand what they're watching when they go at that national level and what they're looking for at that national level. It doesn't mean you can't watch it, doesn't mean you can't enjoy it, but it's different from an informational standpoint than some of these local folks like Evan and the Flying Octopus Pod and what we try to do here and all of that stuff. So tune in to him on Thursday here. But we're going to turn our attention to basketball. We're going to bring on Harry Moroz of the Order of the Blazing Horse podcast and do a little bit of a trade deadline preview and talk about the Red Hot Pistons, who just had the record victory margin here the other day. So stick with us. You're listening to Sports Intel on Jethro FM. Happy to bring on this next guest. We've been trying to get him for a little while now. I'm a fan of this podcast. I don't remember how I came across it. I think it was by following Bryce Simon. He does some work with Bryce's Substack, and I've been following Bryce's Substack, as people know, on the show, and he's been on the show multiple times, and Harry fills in for him and writes some stuff there. But him and his buddy Mickey have a podcast called The Order of the Blazing Horse, which I think is the best name. I get very focused on names, Harry, just to warn you. And that's the best name I've heard for a Pistons podcast, because you can get kind of boring with some of this stuff, because all year I've been trying to figure out a name for this team too. So I know they're kind of leaning towards some things, but I feel like you might be a good person to talk to about that. But as to kind of get you used to the show for your first appearance, we celebrate the thing of the day. So on your way in, well, I'm curious it's National Tater Tot Day. So I'm curious of your favorite way to have a potato on the side of whatever your meal is.
It's tater tots. I didn't even know it was National Tater Tot Day, but that is the way. Also, shout out waffle cut fries.
That's a good one. I was thinking waffle cut. I went with kind of the natural cut, fresh cut fries. But
Cut's good. You know what? You fry a potato. You can do a ton of things with potato, and it's all gravy. Even the hashy bee. I love a hash brown.
You could make it into poutine. That's what you were suggesting, right?
I didn't realize
gravy.
It was this side of the bridge, my man.
I mean, you said gravy and you said fries, so I went to poutine.
I'm down with the poutine too. Yeah.
As you could tell, Harry's got some comedy chops. That's one of the reasons we brought him on the show here. I knew he'd be a good one to ask about favorite potato, but he's got a lot of basketball knowledge too, and this is a good time to have him on. What we're trying to do here is, since he works with Mickey, we're going to do kind of an Order of the Blazing Horse crossover where Harry's going to come on and preview the trade deadline, and then Mickey's going to come on afterwards. He's going to be on next week, and then kind of review our work and and review what actually happened. So I've been listening to the podcast some. I like what you guys have suggested in the various episodes that I've listened to, because we're just talking about this with our Red Wings guest in the last segment. But how everybody wants the big swing. I'm glad that the Pistons haven't necessarily been pushed into the big swing, but I do kind of chuckle, because all year, all we've been talking about is trades for a team that has consistently been the number one ranked official top team in the East.
Yeah, by a significant margin, I'd say. And even when it comes to teams in the NBA, they're actually closer in record to the Oklahoma City Thunder than they are to the third-place team in the entire NBA, that being the San Antonio Spurs. So, yeah, we're talking about adding to a team that is one of the most dominant teams in the NBA. I mean, we're on 61-win pace here.
Exactly, and that's what, because we're more kind of in the team building mode on this show, and I think since we cover all the Detroit teams, we're in a good market for that, because all of them kind of have generally the same strategy, which is draft well, build those prospects up, and then layer in the veterans that work for that culture, because you're trying to cultivate that culture. And the Pistons are really at the forefront of that, probably along with the Lions with the whole grit thing, but they're big on the culture. And so I think that's what people have to remember as they head into this trade deadline. I'm a fan of making a move, much for some of the reasons that you guys have talked about on the show. It's more so, it's less about acquiring somebody. It's great to acquire somebody to improve the team, but they have so much depth and so many pieces that you kind of got to work out some of the issues with the personnel. Otherwise, you're going to have literally too many people on the roster.
Absolutely. And but there's so many instances of that, just seeing how this team is constructed. And I love what you said about building the culture, and I think a lot of it also has to do with character. And I think Trajan Langdon, and also shout out Brad Holmes for doing this as well. They've been very high on high character individuals, which as a fan makes it awesome to root for your team, to see both success in the victory column and also to root for good guys. I think you don't have that opportunity often as like a sports fan that's tied to the city that you root for, and it's really neat that Detroit has that going on right now. And they have so many guys that you want to root for. Even when Trajan was building this current iteration of the roster, when he signed guys like Karis LeVert to the team, and we're trying to push in Jaden Ivey to this place. Now we have guys that are kind of covering multiple areas. Javonte Green as well, where it's like, okay, you cover multiple areas, but now this team feels like it needs to be a little bit more refined, because there really aren't enough minutes for all the people who contribute to the team that you want to root for.
Exactly. It's an amazing problem to have. I mean, you've been covering the team for a while, but it's just funny to have this quick of a turnaround where we were talking about things like, okay, well, we need some, sure, Cade's great and he's developing and he's developing into a star, but we need some secondary ball handlers. We need some more guards around him. And now that problem got fixed really quickly, even with the injury to Ivy. And I'm wondering where you stand on that, because I've kind of vacillated throughout the year. I'm a fan of Ivy. We actually are friends on this show with his dad. We have him on both of my shows pretty often. So so shout out to his family, to Javen, his dad. But I'm not sure what to do with him, because he's kind of one of those pieces that's getting lost in the shuffle a little bit, mainly because I'm mainly blaming the injury part and kind of the dual injury. And I've equated his season now of the equivalent of getting on kind of a moving train here. And so it's tough. All these guys are rolling. Like you said, guys have kind of come out of nowhere and played well. We have the whole Danish Jenkins thing. Guys like Javonte Green and other folks have stepped into roles, and they're looking like a key parts of this team, because they know what they're doing, know where they want to go and where everybody else wants to go. And Jaden's still figuring some of that out, because he hasn't had enough of a chance to be on the floor with these guys and figure out that continuity while you're on the floor.
He got done real dirty with that injury. It couldn't have happened at a worse time for him. It happened at, I guess, a fortunate time for the team, as far as they were finding their legs and going, so they were able to weather and actually come out with a very impressive record in his absence. But before he went down, he was averaging 19 points a game, shooting 41% from three, making some really exciting shots. He had that game-winning three-point and the foul against the Sacramento that the announcers couldn't believe. He had that shot against Toronto with the drive and the float. And he had this ability to show he was able to really get past guys, really start draining threes. And that was super exciting. And we're like, okay, we're going to pair this guy with Cade. They barely played together. Is that going to be the backcourt of the future? And then we lose it for, 11 months, almost a year with a broken leg. And then he has to have a procedure on his other leg because of complications, I think, from like compensating weight. Just coming back from injuries, very difficult. And now he's got to trust his body to get back to that speed and the pace of play with this team playing first-place basketball. On top of that, now he's introduced to a role that he wasn't expecting to be at the beginning of the season, and it's a role that he's not that familiar with, which is coming off the bench, playing with guys that he's also not familiar with. So there's so much chemistry he has to work on. Plus, the trust in your body thing is real. Even if he's 100% back to full health, it's still, you have to be able to remember your body the way it was and not think about how sensitive it is now or how sensitive it was before. And that's an incredibly difficult mental block to overcome. It takes a lot of players. I mean, when you look at this team history-wise, injury-wise, at the beginning of THJ's career with Detroit, he got injured and he couldn't hit a bucket for forever. And then after a while, he got better, really caught on. THJ was an incredible player for this team. Same with Alec Burks. Alec Burks went through, a 20-game span when he was injured, couldn't hit a shot for forever, and that's what he was supposed to do. Now, Jaden Ivey is known for his burst, his speed, and that he hasn't been able to do since he's been back, which is very frustrating. I get it. It's like a tough thing, and when fans are watching, they're, I'm sure, frustrated with it as well. I guarantee they're not as frustrated as he is. The shot, though, is still there. He's still shooting 38% from three, which is really nice to have. The big thing with him is we were hoping that you could make him a secondary ball handler. You could maybe stagger him and Cade when he's out there. I think the one thing that we have learned over the process of his time in Detroit is he's kind of more of a wing than he is a point guard or even a combo 1-2. To me, he's a 2-3 more than a 1-2. So once you get into this mindset of, okay, that's just going to be who can we pair him with, I think it's to his benefit if you pair him with Danis Jenkins, who I do want to talk about a little bit later. It's actually, it's pretty important with his contract coming up. But Danis is a great ball handler. So those two can make things happen. Compare him with Cade Cunningham because those two can make things happen. And I think getting his confidence up will be important. He's going to be a restricted free agent at the end of the season if they don't come to some sort of extension, and not extension, but they don't come to a long-term deal at the end of it. And I know there's all this chatter about him at the trade deadline, and I think it's because people are disappointed in his performance. But, on the real, he's coming back from an injury, and even if he's not great, even if he's not, really in the playoff rotation, isn't there a pretty strong chance that he's going to be the player he was last year or close to the player he was last year with a full year of integration, with a full year of, getting back into shape? And in that case, then you're going to have him on a deal better than the deal you're expecting this year, whether it's that qualifying offer you can get, which is going to be somewhere between $12.5 or $13.5 million, and they hold on to him, or you sign him to, I don't know, a couple years to anything under $20 million, maybe a couple for 15, something like that, because a lot of teams aren't going to poach this guy in RFA. Teams can't really poach players with restricted free agency anyway because of the waiting period. They have to go through a whole week's wait, and by that time, free agency's over, so it's not a smart investment from other teams. So even if they don't ship him, which I don't know if you should at this point, just because it's kind of a low buy or a low sell on Jaden Ivey, who, again, a lot of people were saying should be the starting guard next to Cade Cunningham as recent as last year. It seems kind of wild to just ship him out for peanuts.
I totally agree. There's a lot of great stuff in there. I think that's the best explanation I've heard of the Ivy situation, because the only reason that I've gravitated a little bit more, I still am on the side of keep him, but the free agency worries me a little bit. But I like how you described that, because if his value is depressed and you're able to sign him for that range that you're talking about, that is a tremendous value, especially because you did take a chance by saying, okay, we're going to see one more year out of Ivy and Duran. Now, those situations have gone vastly different directions. Duran obviously just got named an All-Star. He's going to
Shout out JD.
Huge.
22 years old, All-Star, first multiple All-Stars for Detroit since 2008. JB Bickerstaff coaching the All-Star team. Let's go, D.
Exactly. I was just talking about him, about Bickerstaff not winning Coach of the Year last year. I'm still salty about that, but he's getting his flowers this year, and they're kind of leaving Cleveland in the dust. So I'm happy about that. But yeah, Duran's been a great fit. People are talking about, okay, we need a number 2 next to Cade, or we need a secondary scorer. And I mean, Duran's developing before our eyes. Physically, he was already developed. I think that's why people had high expectations of him. I mean, the guy looks like he's about my age. I'm 42. If I didn't have gray, I would look about like Jalen Duran's age. He's a grown man.
I mean, that's my age, and I don't look anything like that. Yeah.
I mean, he's a grown man if there ever were one, but nobody's carding him at the bar at 22. But he's been great. He's going to get a big contract, as he should. You got to worry about some of the other people coming down the pike with Thompson, and then eventually Holland and others. You got to get Jenkins in the mix, which will cover that. But I think you might kind of even that out if you say, okay, yeah, we're going to sign Duran to the big deal, but if we can get Ivy on for the range that you're talking about, of 15 to 20 million, 12 to 20 million, whatever, something under 20 million, then I think you've found a deal that makes your cap situation infinitely more flexible going forward.
Not only that, but let's say it doesn't work out with Jaden Ivey. Let's say you do sign him to this couple-year deal, you give him $17 million a year. You get him for 2 years, right? And he plays more like he does this year than he has in previous years. Well, now you have a guy who's on a short-term contract making $17 million, who's still shooting the 3-ball great. Every team wants shooters, no matter what. He could be like a second draft candidate. So then you have salary to trade if you want to make a bigger move in the future. So if that's the path you want to go with Jaden Ivey, there are worse things than keeping him. If he doesn't want to be here anymore, if he feels like he's not being used, then by all means, maybe come to some sort of agreement there. And I'm not saying that he shouldn't be traded if you have a deal where maybe it makes sense for both parties to move on, and the team really wants Jaden Ivey. I mean, Troy Weaver is with the New Orleans Pelicans. If you make a deal with them, maybe they want Jaden Ivey. Maybe that's the best for all parties. I'm just trying to say he's a good player with a great work ethic, with history of being a good player, that it's not the worst thing in the world if you retain him after this trade deadline.
Exactly. You're taking advantage of still being able to get potential on his now second contract, which isn't always possible. People are trying to buy potential at that point. And so I think if he had played more, if he was in a different situation, then there would be teams interested in converting him to a lead guard or something else, saying, hey, they haven't gotten the full potential out of him. But now you can get that for both the stretch run and for the coming years if you can re-sign him. So I'm curious. So we got to take a quick break, but I'm curious after the break about then if you are retaining Ivy, how you kind of take care of that spot for Danis and what you see them doing prediction-wise for the trade deadline. So we'll talk about that after the break with Harry. Stick with us. You're listening to Sports Intel on Jethro FM. So coming back here with Harry Moroz of the Order of the Blazing Horse podcast, talking about Pistons trade deadline and what they may do. This is a good problem to have, Harry, and I've been talking about it all year. I think people were it's funny when they did get very deep and then the rotations got kind of mixed up, especially before Jaden came back. It was like, well, there's too many players here. And I wasn't a big believer in that. I think the fact that all these guys got a platform, got a stage, I think that helped for the depth of the team and for value at the trade deadline. They saw what they had out of Danis. Now Sasser's coming back and getting some minutes in various games. They saw that they had something in Javonte Green and Paul Reed and some of these other folks that don't always get minutes, but there are some logistics that you have to take care of because you might shorten up the rotation once you get to the playoffs. So if you do shorten that up, then you're not necessarily using those few guys at the end that, although they may be good players that have played well for you over the course of the season, then you might jettison them at the end of the season. So I'm curious what you see them doing, though, because like you said, these are all great players to root for. There's a lot of great stories on this team, and it will be legitimately difficult. There's no clear this one just isn't working, let's ship them out of town. They all fill their roles pretty well, and maybe with one or two exceptions, everybody's kind of lived up to or exceeded expectations.
Yeah, I think that's accurate. Also, before we go on, I just want to say Happy Black History Month to everybody out there. Cool for that. And now to the trade stuff. As far as the roster goes and the construction goes, they have a ton of guys. And that's great because they're all contributing. You named guys that barely played most nights that are still putting up powerful minutes. It feels like every time Marcus Sasser comes in, he scores like double-digit points in single-digit minutes, racks up assists, racks up steals. Pretty cool. Paul Reed balls out. Every time he comes in, absolutely balls out. It's very fun. And, yeah, they can't play all those guys in the playoffs. But watching the playoffs year after year, the same thing is true every year. The team that is the healthiest by the time they reach the finals is the team that wins the championship. That's how you go far in the playoffs. Well, for Detroit, because they have so much depth, if somebody goes down, they've got a pretty good trove of people who can come in and fill in it, and you're not losing that much. So while, yeah, they have a lot of guys who aren't going to play a lot of minutes, maybe not even play at all in the playoffs, if they get into an injury situation, they're better equipped than almost every other team in the league, save maybe Oklahoma City, to make up for that. I believe they're like third in the league in bench scoring, as far as bench scoring units go. So that's pretty cool. That being said, they do have to make at least one move because there is no chance that Danis Jenkins isn't getting converted to a standard contract. A report came out that his team turned down a league minimum deal that he got offered, which makes sense because it'd be almost for no money, and it'd be for this year and next year. Because he's on a two-way, the conversion goes, the deal you can offer him right now in the season is it can only go as long as what his contract is. So that would be till next year. So they could offer him the minimum, they could offer him the mid-level exception, but they already sent that out to somebody, so they can't offer him that. And they can offer the biannual, so he could make like $5 million a year, but that's not great either. And also, then the Pistons couldn't use it next year. So if you want to look at what's happening with Danis, he's for sure going to get converted because on the trade deadline is when his last playable game or last appearanceable game is available. So they have to get him on this roster. And I mean, he closed out the last couple. He's going to be on this team. He's proven to be the second best ball handler on this team next decade. He hits so many big shots in the big moment. He's always ready. He's about that action, which when we're talking about potential names for this team, I do want to say I heard Amari Sankofa II mention the term about the action with people in the Pistons. I think that's a great name for these Pistons, the about the action Pistons, because they're all ready for it. But Danis is going to get on this team, which means you either have to waive somebody, like maybe Bobby Clinton or maybe Isaac Jones, and then convert them to a two-way, or you make one of these consolidation trades. And when it comes to that, I think a lot of people are looking at essentially the same, maybe two or three names, depending on who you are. Those three names are typically Karis LeVert, Jaden Ivey, and Tobias Harris. Tobias Harris, to me, because they keep saying important about this guy, they keep mentioning how important he is, and because how much he wanted to come to Detroit, and because of how big a veteran presence and leadership presence he's had for this team, it seems to me it would be a tough thing to do to trade him to anybody, and we can get into potential trades later down the line. But he's the biggest salary, so if you want to make a big trade, chances are you got to include him. Jaden Ivey, we already went over like how teams value him, what his value is around the league, what his value is to the Pistons, and like his contract's not that much. It's like $10 million. So like, yeah, you can add him to a deal, but it's not like a huge deal. Karis LeVert, he's got 2 years of deal. He's making like $15 million. He's kind of redundant in the roster. He hasn't been shooting great. The defense has been fine. I think he's actually been a pretty good player. I think people kind of bag on him a little bit too much. But as far as redundancy goes, he's a movable piece that you could do. So pairing him with somebody to ship out would be helpful. The other complication here is that the Pistons have a $14.3 million TPE. So they could bring back 14.3 for nobody, but that just adds another player in this roster that we already have too many players on the roster for. I know people say, like, historically, TPEs don't get used. Yeah, but historically, TPEs aren't for $14.3 million. They're not often this much money. So it's going to be tough as far as that goes. What I will say about the trades, and we can look to last year for how this went, Trajan Langdon, if not transparent, he's been incredibly translucent with what he has said he's going to do with his team and what he does do with his team. And they keep talking, him and JB, we both keep talking about, we like our guys. We really like our guys. We're not going to shake up anything. We don't want to shake up this chemistry, which I get when you look at the top three teams in the NBA. They're all young. Oklahoma City, San Antonio, and Detroit, top three teams in the NBA. Some of the deepest teams in the NBA, youngest teams in the NBA, and also top three defenses in the NBA. So there's a pattern here as far as it goes. That being said, it doesn't mean he's not going to be opportunistic, which is what he did last year with Dennis Schroeder, which is how we have this TPE in the first place. So when you look at what this team has, it has too many players. When you look at what this team needs, it maybe needs a shooter. Those two things might come together, if not for a bigger deal, because a bigger deal could chip out more people. It's just going to be complicated.
I agree with all that stuff. I mean, that's it. These are all good problems to have. That's the thing about what we're talking about here, because I mean, people really have earned their roles, earned their keep. And you talked about, LeVert is kind of the piece that I think, he's not necessarily long for this team. And I think the bigger issue, I think you hit on the bigger issue, which I'm all for having that depth in the playoffs, because you hit on it. I mean, we saw it last year. People are saying, well, hey, we would have beaten the Knicks had we had Ivy and beef stew. Well, that may be, but it's a war of attrition sometimes in sports and in the NBA, and so you have to survive that stuff. This year, they're much more poised to survive it if they retain a lot of the players that they have and don't ship out much at the trade deadline. But I do think the bigger issue is one you referenced earlier in the interview, which is they've got to clear up some minutes for the right people and make sure that they have enough, once they get down the stretch, have enough time for maybe what is a surging Jaden Ivey at that point, if he's still on the team, and then maybe he takes some of those minutes that LeVert would occupy, and you want him in that because he's probably trending the right way, whereas with LeVert's age, and like you said, he gets too much heat. I'm not bagging on him. I think he's been fine. But between the age and the lack of a premier fit in this team, I think you want to bet on a younger guy that's probably ascending throughout the year in Ivy. And like you said, you need shooters, so you want to just shed one or two guys so that you can add in a shooter. I'm curious if you have your eyes on anybody. We get one name that's mentioned all the time. I think every time we've talked about the trade deadline, sometimes they mention multiple people, but there's one guy that's been on the bingo card every time.
Which guy?
Well, I'm wondering if you're going to hit him. I'm going to let you kind of pick some guys, and I feel like you're going to hit him anyway.
Okay. Well, I mean, there are different tiers of guys that you can get on this team. So let's just get into some of these guys in general. I'm assuming this is the big one that people are talking about. And it's rumored from Bobby Marks and Jake Fisher, Omari in the Detroit Free Press pitched an article about how this trade could be beneficial to Detroit. Is the name Michael Porter Jr. is the name?
Well, so he's been mentioned a lot, and I'll give you a clue. It's not in that first tier. It's not not a big name.
Okay.
We're not talking Porter Jr. We're not talking Markkanen. We're not talking Trey Murphy. We're talking a guy that would be more of a pure shooter, but it's somebody from a team that may have to shed some salary and a roster spot. And so, and could be a good fit for the Pistons. So I can give it to you too. We don't have to quiz you on it.
Give it to me. Let's save the listeners some guys, because if with those hints, I would guess it's maybe Sam Hauser or
bingo.
It's Sam Hauser.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So my thoughts on Sam Hauser: would he be a fit? There's no question. I mean, his brother played at Michigan State. That's pretty cool. Wait, is that true? I think that's true.
Yep, Joey.
So that's pretty cool. Love the Michigan State connection, green, white. I went to Michigan State. That's cool. Don't love everybody from Michigan State. Don't love everybody who went to Michigan State who Pistons have been rumored to have interest in, for what it's worth. Again, I really care about high-character guys on this team. My question about Sam Hauser is, why on earth would Boston give him up?
That would be my question too. I mean, I get the argument that they may have to shed some salary and shed a spot. I don't know that that's the one that you would pick if you were them, because that's a coveted. What we're talking about, basically, we're talking about the Pistons wanting that. But I mean, what team doesn't need more shooters? Every team would take more shooters, and he's a good sized shooter. He fills a very good role. He's not going to get played off the floor for his defense. So I think that's a piece that, although yes, you're going down a tier from the Murphys and the Markkanens and the Porter Juniors of the world, but I also think it's going to be more expensive than just, hey, we'll toss you a throwaway player here and there and a pick. I don't necessarily think it's going to be as cheap as just, oh yeah, you just want to give him away at the deadline. Whereas you hit on the scenario that I do think is really the most likely, which is, okay, what do people need to cut out here, and can I get kind of something out of nothing? They got Schroeder, who was a very productive player and a good fit for this team. It was inevitable that he was going to leave under that scenario, but he was a good fit for this team, and they got him for nothing. And so there are potentially going to be deals out there where you can get a player of value, but I don't know if that player is somebody like Sam Hauser.
I don't think it's going to be Sam because of all the stuff that you said. In the 3 and D, like especially non-liability and like somewhat good D players with size on like not huge contracts are the most coveted players in the entire NBA. And Boston is trying to win a championship. Make no mistake, Boston is going to make a run at this championship. They're a very good team. Every time they played the Pistons, it has been very competitive. They know what they're doing. They're coached by a great coach. They still have they have a guy who's like vying for MVP with Jaylen Brown this year. That team is great, and Keita is no slouch at the center either. They didn't dip as much as people. I think Indiana took all the tanking that people thought that Boston was going to do and added it to their own tank as far as how bad they went. But Boston, to me, doesn't seem like a team that's going to ship that asset. When it does come to like maybe making that sort of opportunistic trade, I throw out a couple names. Mickey and I talked about it in our podcast. There are 3 or 4 names that are dream candidates. 2, I think, are that like make sense, but I don't know how realistic any of this stuff would be. And I want to start off by saying I don't think there's going to be any trade for Detroit until there's clarity on what Giannis Antetokounmpo is going to do. Like if they decide they're not going to trade him at this deadline, things will start happening. But if they decide to trade him, and you know teams want to trade for him, and you know he probably wants to get traded for too, so he can make that extension money. If he doesn't get traded this offseason, or if he doesn't get traded by this deadline, he can't sign his $280 million extension in October. So it's to his benefit, do that faster and all that. And also, more teams can compete, so other teams want to be going after it. It's why Golden State's looking to do it. It's why Minnesota's looking to do it. It's why Miami's looking to do it. When you think of the 4 teams, New York, Minnesota, Miami, and Golden State, 3 of those teams Detroit could potentially get involved with. So let's say Miami wants to make a move. Oh, sorry, Miami, you don't have enough picks. We want a 2027 first-round pick. Detroit could say, yo, Miami, we would love Andrew Wiggins. Or, yo, Miami, we would love Norm Powell. Shout out Norm Powell, first-time All-Star for him as well. Both those dudes fit this team big. They both get their own bucket. Norm is an absolute bucket getter, absolutely torched the Pistons early this season. Not a great defender, but, Duncan Robinson ain't a great defender either. And if you can put Duncan Robinson in the second unit playing the role that Beasley did last year, which is what everyone thought he was going to do this year, and now you have a guy who can get his own bucket like Norm Powell in the first unit, your shooting woes are kind of solved. Andrew Wiggins, you get him, maybe Tobias Harris goes to the bench and absolutely cooks bench units. I don't know if that happens or not, but Wiggins is great from 3. Wiggins is great in the break. Wiggins is a good defender, and Wiggins has been an NBA champion. These guys have playoff experience. That matters a lot. So you could offer I don't know, you could offer Karras, maybe Ivy in a first for either of those, or maybe just Karras in the first for either of those, or Karras in a younger guy, maybe Sasser. No shade to Sasser. I love Sasser. Some of the best players on this team. I'm just saying, if you're going to trade multiple players, which you probably need to, you could make a move to help Miami help themselves get Giannis. If that was in the cards. I don't think it's likely. I haven't heard any reporting about it. It just is an opportunity. Minnesota, because they're up against the second cap, if they really want to make a move for Giannis, they got to get real tricky with it. And if they do that, I don't think this player would go out, but if I were the Pistons and I was listening, I'd be listening deep for Dante DiVincenzo, because that, again, all about the action. That guy would really help out. Tenacious defender, great three-point shooter. You know he wants to beat the Knicks more than anybody. I think that's a very unlikely scenario, but the contract's great, the player fits great. I would love to have him on the team. Third scenario, Giannis gets traded. Bucks are sending somebody out. They just want to get something done. They have to include other salary, or maybe Bucks want to build and bring in somebody like Ja or something and bet on the future. I don't know. But if the Bucks have to get off Bobby Portis' contract, if he's on contract for another couple of years, he's been all right. That dude has been lighting it up from three, and that guy would fit Piston culture great as well. Plus, that solves your backup four situation. So that gives you more depth at the four position. That is my idea of top tier Pistons being opportunistic. Lower tier Pistons being opportunistic would be getting somebody like Luke Kennard who can drain the three, always has been able to drain the three, get him with the TPE, and then maybe make some moves around the roster here and there. If they were able to get Ayo Dosunmu from Chicago, that would be disgusting good. And when I say disgusting, I mean super, super good. I'd be thrilled about it. Kid is great. If they're able to get Moses Moody from Golden State, that's another TPE guy you could look at getting. And that's really about it as far as the TPE stuff goes. There was some talk about maybe Malik Monk, but in the offseason, trades did not seem interested in Malik. People seem pretty against his $19 million a year or $42 million over the next 2 years contract. But we saw him play Detroit just recently, and the slams are great, and the three-point shooting is great. He could really help out this team. It seems to me like it's probably going to be a player we're almost not even considering at this point coming to this team. But a couple players also going out.
I like those scenarios, though, as far as we've got those now kind of on the books as predictions, and then Mickey and I will cover this here.
I think predictions is maybe a little bit generous. How about, to quote Mariah Carey, some sweet, sweet fantasies, baby?
That sounds good to me. That's we're a classic country station, so you're not going to hear a lot of Mariah here. But no, that's great. I appreciate you coming on. We'll look forward to having you back on at some point. We're going to look forward to having Mickey on. But on the way out, make sure to tell people where they can listen to you guys here.
Sure. Guys, follow the Order of the Blazing Horse, the only Detroit Pistons podcast based on a mystical prophecy. If you don't know, Mickey and I, we were visited by Hooper in a vision after that terrible 2023-2024 season. He told us to make a podcast that would bring the Pistons back to greatness. We're like, there's no way that's true. Then we did it, and look where we are. How crazy is that? So follow us. We're usually on Tuesdays or Wednesdays. We live stream. We're on YouTube. We're on podcasts and Podbean and all that stuff. Check it out. We're also on Blue Sky. It's oobh.bsky.social. That's where we do all our business. Sorry we didn't talk more Michael Porter Jr. I know it's a hot name for everybody. I got a hot take. If you want to know our takes on that, we've got plenty of episodes.
That's a great tease. We'll talk about that more with Mickey next week. Appreciate you being here, and we'll look forward to having you back on.
Thanks so much, Ryan. This was a great show. Have a good time, everybody.
Thanks, Harry. All right, thanks to Harry Moroz. Appreciate him coming on, along with Evan Sabourin and Dr. Michael Williams. We're going to take a quick break and then close up the show. Stick with us. You're listening to Sports Intel on Jethro FM. I want to thank them, along with our other sponsors, Eric Hall Aesthetic and General Dentistry, Calder Financial, Grand Management Group, Rydan Investments, Encore Business Group, Jim Hegland of JH Realty, Williams Chiropractic, I-Corps, and the West Michigan Sports Commission. We appreciate all them being on. We appreciate D-Money making his way through the snow, getting here getting his car started. He ran here. We're impressed that you were able to make it by the end of the first break.
Yeah, it was. They'll talk about it for years to come. So when I write my book and it gets optioned into a movie deal, you'll know the full story.
Well, hopefully I can get a producer credit or something. Maybe they'll consult me on that movie here.
I'm looking for financing first, so.